Hi guys, this is Mike back with this week's episode of Ask Me Anything Python. In this week's episode, we've got two questions. Both questions are from the same user, David Johns. Now David has basically raised one question, but then we had a conversation and it led to something quite different being brought up. Both are really valid questions, so I'm going to take the time to cover both of those this week and hopefully we'll learn a lot from it. So our first question is basically about security, and the second one basically covers the subject of what's the best IDE, especially for someone who's learning Python. So in his first message he asks, I need to find a way to securely display, create and possibly change a password. The password will be stored on a remote server along with other sensitive information. And I'm wondering the best way to implement this from a security point of view. I know that inherently the password field is actually a character field, and this doesn't really fill me with any confidence that my project could easily be compromised. So this basically brings up a number of points that we should talk about in terms of securely handling passwords on websites. Now the first one is basically how to create, possibly change and display a password on your site, on your server. Generally it's a bad idea to display passwords on any page, so that's probably something you would never do anyway. The possibility of changing and updating passwords kind of leads us into the subject of how passwords are actually stored. So on a server, we store passwords in a character field in the database, that's correct. However, it's not stored in its original format. When you store these passwords, we get rid of the original password and we destroy it completely. But before we do that, we change it. So we change it into a format that basically is what we call a hash, so it's been encoded. So what we do is we take the initial string and we send it through a process and then turn it into a random series of letters and numbers that can be decoded later using a certain algorithm, and we basically send it through the same algorithm again when the password is supplied by the user. The next thing that we do is that we then destroy the password, and at that point our database stops having anything to do with the original password. So in theory you shouldn't be able to store anybody's passwords. So at that point you do have a character field inside of your database, but it's filled with this random set of letters and numbers. So basically at that point you don't have the original password anyway. So if a user loses their password, what you've really got to think about is how can I initiate the process of allowing them to log back in with a new password. So the simplest way to do that is to basically send them a link to a secure URL that you have on your website that will allow them to go onto a page and type in a new password twice and confirm that. Now on the link that you send to them, really what you're going to have to do is supply them with an identifier that's unique to their account. So you'd have the URL address and then a random string that you generated on the end, and you check that random string matches up to their user account before you take them through the change password process. And that's how you generally handle the password process. You don't under any circumstances keep an original password and email it out to them, because like you say, that's not really not a very confident way of keeping passwords. We have something called a PBKDF2, which is a password based key derivation function 2, and it uses SHA-256 hash along with that, which basically means that we stick it through a process of this key derivation, We send it through this derivation function, and it will then garble the original password. Then we use the SHA-256 to garble it even further. So the original password is messed up big style. However, if someone then logs in to your site and manages to get access to your database, they'll get your database information, yes, but they'll also get a load of these files, or fields rather, that basically will contain all of these massive hash. So basically, at that point, they then have to go with the process of trying to decode those strings that are in the database. Not such a simple task though, because basically it's going to take them in the region of about a couple of 100 years to decode each one of those passwords. And you can imagine that's going to take a long time. So much time so that it's possibly impractical to even bother trying. And that's the whole point of using a password hashing system. Is not that people can't decrypt these things, it's just it takes so long that it isn't practical anymore. So that's our first question over. The next question that David brought up was, can you talk about choice of IDE over other IDEs? I know this particular subject is open to discussion, criticism and personal preferences. Yeah, it is. But before I go spending my cash, I would like to know the best one to begin on. I have tried most, including PyCharm, Wing, Ninja, Komodo, but can't make my mind up which way to go. Well, there's quite a number of options there. Eclipse is a free one. Most operating systems have a text editor, but they don't necessarily show you any kind of useful text highlighting. There are a number of IDEs which were mentioned there. There's Wing IDE, which is the one I use personally, and I don't work for them or anything like that, so it's not an advert. It's just for me, it works much better for my Linux system, which I develop on Linux all the time, because it just gets rid of so many problems that other Mac and Windows users experience. And they do a Wing IDE 101 IDE that you'll pay nothing for, that you can use just to get you started and learn. The next one that I've used is PyCharm, and I've used that in production as well, and that's pretty good. My only criticism of PyCharm, which is a personal preference, is that it uses loads of memory in comparison to other IDEs. Me personally, I don't want my IDE taking up absolutely loads and loads of memory when all I'm actually doing is editing a text editor, editing text. Other than that, I think that it's a really good IDE. It's got really good text complete, which as Wing IDE also has that as well, which is good. And I think that's important when you're learning, just to basically help you to remember where things are, and as time goes by you'll rely on it less and less. I think the main point that I get out of IDEs is that you can have a debug feature, and I can't stress enough how much you need to have a debug feature. If you don't have a debug feature, you are not doing your job properly. The reason for that is basically that if you can't debug code, you're going to waste a lot of time dropping stuff into log files and hoping that you're going to find the bugs. Debug features save you way more time. Okay, so that's the couple of questions that we had for this week. Pretty in-depth ones, so they took quite a bit of time. If you've got a question that you want me to answer, or you want me to go through some kind of subject, then leave me a message in the comments down below, and I'll do the best I can to answer that. If you found this interesting, then please click the like button. If you want to know more and you want to see more in this series and these episodes, then click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.